my prepared speech has been actually is more focused on the Christian pilgrimages. But the Christian pilgrimage is only one part of the pilgrimage that is coming over to the Holy Land. Of course, we have a problem with the Muslim pilgrimages coming over, not because we have a problem with the Muslims, but it's because of the restrictions that has been created with the modern state of Israel. All the Muslims who are or who would like to visit Israel or the Holy Land, then they have to come through a Israeli gateway, and this way they need a visa before coming over. And to obtain a visa, probably it's quite problematic. Not from the Arab world, now they will accept from Indonesia, from Turkey, from Malaysia, but it is, for us, it's something to look forward in the future to develop this market, and we are working very hard to make it happen. But my speech is going to deal with the Christian pilgrimage and our local community. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed conference conveners, it is with great pleasure that I'm attending the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation 15th International Conference. It is fitting that this conference has the unifying theme of one humanity, different faiths, working together to restore dignity, justice, and prosperity. In that vein, I'm going to touch on the meaning and importance of religious tourism, as well as the environment that affects pilgrimages to the Holy Land. We all know Jerusalem as the spiritual capital and the core city for the three monotheistic faiths. It has sites that we all cherish. Indeed, Christian tourism has been pivotal in moving the market in Palestine. It is an ancient tradition, a very specialized craft, and is at the heart of religious exchange as well as sustenance for the Christian Palestinians that wait to receive their brothers and sisters from all over the world. This has taken place throughout time as the unique journey and experience that the Holy Land offers. Palestinians have always waited with eagerness and anticipation, particularly for sacred periods such as Easter, to continue their tradition of hosting. There has always been this custom of reception that continues with the Latin, Greek, Roman monasteries, Austrian hospice, Casanova of the Franciscans, and the Notre Dame, among many others. Nonetheless, the city and the country has been contested time and again due to divisions instead of unity. Unfortunately, in recent history, it is the impoverishment of the city and its Palestinian people that have paid the price for its contestation, a situation which has compelled many Palestinians, particularly Palestinian Christians, to leave. I'm here today to remind you of our legacy of receiving pilgrims in the Holy Land and the importance of your role in breathing new life into our cherished sites. How do we continue and strengthen our legacy? It is in revitalizing the industry of tourism. We need to fill Palestinian hotels not only in Easter and Christmas, but throughout the year. We need visitors to spend more time in Christian Palestinian area. We need them to feel that Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Jericho, and Nazareth, among other cities, are a home away from home. We need to make functional the beautiful buildings such as the Convention Center near Solomon's Pools in Bethlehem with all our denominations, bringing Christians together to promote and invest in tourism from all corners of the globe. To this end, we need to reintroduce Christian Palestine to those in the diaspora, strengthening their links with the Holy Land, which is also their homeland. In fact, it belongs to us all, as it is the land of our faith, which makes it our duty to treat it with responsibility, priority, and an obligation to support our sisters and brothers that continue to carry on and pass on the word and the stories that accompany our faith in the Holy Land. Our strength lies in our ability to tap into the human element, the respect for the plurality of Jerusalem and the rest of the country. This can only be achieved through practice. Our convictions and our moral obligation towards the Holy Land should push us to invest specifically in the tourism sector, whether through our participation as as tourists promoting pilgrimages or financing local initiatives. We must set the example not only by extending a hand, but instigating sound productivity based on our ethics and responsibility with the community. A thriving tourism sector is one with strong bonds that transverse boundaries, compelling our brethren to stay in the Holy Land and permitting us to continue with our service. We can all benefit and profit from an approach based on inclusivity, looking forward to prosperity with dignity and justice. Thank you. I'll leave now the floor, I guess, for Samit. He has a presentation, and I hope you'll enjoy it all.
Good afternoon, everyone, and again, thank you for coming, and thanks to HCEF for bringing us together and for inviting me once again. Maybe to shed a bit more light on the tourism industry in Palestine, I have a bit of a visual presentation. Pretty much I'll give an overview, a quick glance at the destination, highlight some of the main challenges that we face as tourism planners and stakeholders, a quick journey through some of the main sites and attractions that Palestine does have to offer and how we would like to try and package them together, and then some very interesting and useful online guides that can help you plan your next trip or pilgrimage to the Holy Land. I think it's clear from today's session that it's very hard to separate Palestine and Israel, especially when it comes to the Holy Land experience or to a pilgrimage experience. You cannot separate one from the other. No pilgrimage experience can be full without visits to Nazareth and Tiberias or Bethlehem, Jerusalem, and Jericho. It's really one product that we sell. The problem is how these products are structured, how, they're structured in a quite an unbalanced way. And in many cases, our industry has been transformed into this mass tourism kind of industry, leaving a lot of the host communities very marginalized and off the beaten track of most of these pilgrims. Despite everything, and we're still seeing some serious signs of growth for inbound visitors to Palestine. It's still record numbers. But the sad thing is that these are record numbers of visitors, but the spending and revenue that goes and trickles down into the host communities remains minimal. Some of the main destinations, Russia, the US has been in the top 5 destinations for the last, I think, 5 years running now. Italy, Poland, and Germany, and this is in terms of day visitors. For us, what's more important are the overnight visitors. And again, we see here, Russia, Poland, Italy, and the US. Palestinians in 1948 were referred to as Palestinians, obviously living inside Israel, who come and visit and spend overnights inside the West Bank. Obviously, some of the main challenges that we do face as tourism planners, and that's my background. No control over borders. We have no airport, there's no taxes, there's no visas, so it's very hard to start collecting revenues and controlling visitor flow. It's impossible. The separation wall obviously is transforming Palestine into different cantons, which we all know. There's a lack of freedom of movement for the locals, for the foreigners, and more specifically for the tourism service providers. And I'll get to that. A prime example is guides. I think there was a question earlier about how come we don't have, how come not enough groups are supplied with Christian guides. Very simple. I think there's a lack. There's a limited number of Palestinian Christian guides. In fact, there's only around 300 Palestinian licensed tourist guides. Half are licensed by the Israeli Ministry of Tourism, based out of Jerusalem, and the other half are from the West Bank and licensed by the Palestinian Ministry of Tourism. And from those in the West Bank, only around 40 have permits to visit and tour and take groups inside Israel. So again, you see the discontinuity. It becomes very difficult for us to. We have 300 guides who are competing around 5,000 or 6,000 Israeli guides. Can you guys hear like this? Okay. All right. Again, land confiscation and settlement expansion is dipping into our resources, exploitation of our natural resources, and we're faced with a severe unfair competition by a highly resourced, highly funded, highly efficient Israeli tourism industry, both public and private. We don't have the resources. That's why I think we have to be much more strategic in how we spend and where we spend our efforts and our money. Again, our industry over the last decades has been marginalized, especially in East Jerusalem, which is completely disconnected from the West Bank in many cases, at least on the local level. A lot of development of tourism, of the tourism infrastructure in East Jerusalem is very difficult. In some cases, it can be appealing in terms of an investment opportunity, but it's also very difficult and quite expensive to invest in new properties. I mean, real estate is extremely expensive. Getting the right permits for Palestinians to develop their industry is also very difficult, but you can do it if you have the right perseverance, I guess. It's very difficult to do long-term planning. There are too many contingencies, too many scenarios. We don't know what's ahead 2 years from now to be able to plan long-term. So most of our planning is much more reactive and short-term and emergency-based. And like I said, there's a very big leakage of tourist spending when it comes to the if we're looking at the economic benefit, the last number I saw is almost for every $1 spent, close to 80 or 90 cents are leaked outside the Palestinian host communities. So these tourists are coming in their millions, but they're not really benefiting the host communities. And this is what we try to rectify, both in how we structure these programs, and I'll get to that very shortly. Despite these challenges, I mean, we are seeing, like I said, like the chart showed, we're seeing an increase in arrivals and in overnight stays. We're seeing new markets are opening up and emerging. New hotels and restaurants, and here again we see the resilience of the private sector. Every time there's signs of let's say economic stability or political stability, you immediately start seeing the private sector investing money into tourism industry. Between '94 and 2000, close to $700 million was invested by the private sector in tourism development. Then we had the Intifada. Obviously there was a lot of losses, but the minute we started seeing the industry recover, we started seeing investments again. Today there are close to, I think, according to the Ministry of Tourism, almost 30 hotels under construction, adding another 1,000 rooms to our carrying capacity, which again just shows the resilience of our private sector. There's an ongoing programs for site restoration and rehabilitation of sites that stretch from the far north in Jenin all the way to the south, and these are gradually going to be integrated into the offer. Some are religious sites like the Church of Burkin, which is one of the oldest churches in the Holy Land. It's been just rehabilitated, renovated. There's around 18 sites that are slated for this that have been selected with the industry, so hopefully we can incorporate them to enrich the actual experience of the visiting pilgrims. Like I said, we're also seeing a lot of new products developing. Palestine is starting to see an emergence of alternative tourism, hiking, nature-based tourism. They're still very small pockets, but they are developing, and they're enabling us to actually more gradually reintegrate into the regional tourism offer. And that brings us to my next slide. If you look at the Holy Land, it is Israel, Palestine, and in many cases you can actually extend it into Jordan. And these are from the national tourism strategies of the 3 destinations. So we can see where the synergy is. We can see how in many cases we are selling the same product, and it's how do we differentiate ourselves to actually get a bigger piece of the pie. For those of you who haven't been to Palestine, and for those of you who have, I just have a very quick visual presentation, quick pictures about what Palestine has to offer. And one problem that we face is that we're stuck in this bubble that outside of the pilgrimage experience, Palestine doesn't have anything to offer. And this is what we try to change, because yes, we are at the core of any pilgrimage experience. Close to 60% of most of the religious sites are located in the West Bank, but there's a lot more to offer. So if you just look at Palestine again from a pilgrimage perspective, what kind of religious sites we have, starting with Jerusalem, which is home to the 3 monotheistic religions. Anywhere you look, there is some kind of a church or a mosque or a temple. Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus, again, full of Christian sites. It's at the core of any Christian pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Jericho, which is one of the oldest, it is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world, dating 10,000 years, and does have lots of different, again, sites and shrines for Christians. Nablus, and further up in the northern West Bank, this has been very marginalized over the last I'm going to say for over a decade. They receive very few visitors. In many cases, it's because of the way these programs are structured. And I won't go into too much detail, but usually pilgrims, when they come for around a week. They spend a few days up in the north, in Nazareth and Tiberias, inside Israel. And then as they head their way south towards Bethlehem or Jerusalem, there's 2 tracks that they take, either along the coast or down through the Jordan Valley, which leaves hardly any visitors visiting these marginalized sites up in Nablus, Jenin, Sebastia, and other places. Today it is somewhat possible. There is the main crossing at the northern West Bank called the Jalame crossing, which enables tourists to actually, as they're proceeding from the north down to the south, to go straight through and cut through the West Bank and actually visit some of these sites that have been rehabilitated and actually try and benefit the actual host communities who have been marginalized for quite some time. Gaza, again, today might not be the best time to visit Gaza, but its time will come. And it will be, again, an integral part of our tourism offer. Now, just going outside of the pilgrimage experience and looking at what Palestine does have to offer outside of that. Again, in terms of history and archaeological history of Palestine, stretching from Jerusalem to Jericho, anywhere you look, anywhere you dig, you're going to find some archaeological sites. Palestine does have a very rich cultural heritage, and there are dozens of festivals that take place every year. Some are authentic, some have become a bit more modern, but they receive very few international visitors. Part of it is a shortcoming that we're not communicating these events enough. But again, they do have the potential, and you can easily build around, because for pilgrims, I mean, I sincerely believe that, you know, the religious and spiritual aspect of a pilgrimage is one component. But unless you add on around that the cultural aspect, the human aspect, you're not really going to have what we like to call a pilgrimage for transformation and really having the experience that you deserve. Musical festivals, again, I mean, people don't understand, or they don't realize that there is a vibrant cultural life despite what we're living under, despite the situations that we face. Again, we are resilient, we have a love for life, and we need people to come and experience this with us. The landscape. Palestine is so small, but yet the landscape is so diverse, from the beautiful olive terraces to the desert to the Dead Sea, and you can all visit this in one trip because it's so compact, it's so small in space. Like I said, there are brand new programs popping up, a lot of hiking trails that are being marked, bird watching. People are surprised to hear about there's bird watching in Palestine. Well, yes, our location is right on the path of migratory birds. There's an annual bird watching festival. And again, this is some of the initiatives that we're trying to do, because if you look at what Israel, Jordan, and other neighboring destinations have done, they have diversified their tourism offer. And for us, yes, the pilgrimage, the religious tourism is the backbone, but we need to build around this because there is an interest from inbound tourists, again, like I said, for adding much more of a cultural dimension and a human dimension to their tours. Historic Palestine. Like I said, we cannot really differentiate when you're looking at Palestine or at the Holy Land. You're looking at Israel and Palestine. Just before I finish, I mean, again, how to structure a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. I think the HCEF's Living Stones program is an ideal example, because they add different dimensions to the tours. They add the human dimension, whether it's the homestays, whether it's celebrating Mass with the local Christian communities, whether it's interacting with different NGOs or different communities. And obviously there's also the more balanced geographical spread of these visits. Bethlehem, unfortunately, in many cases, visitors, they come for a half a day. We're trying to expand that to have them stay for 1 night, 2 nights, have Bethlehem be their launching pad. Places up further in the farther north, like Nablus, that doesn't receive hardly any visitors, Jenin. Again, the programs of the HCF, they try to stretch this out so that there's more economic benefit and interaction with host communities across the country. Some useful guides, again, our presence online is marginalized and limited when we're looking at what our Israeli counterparts can do, especially, in terms of online promotion. I'm just highlighting around 5 or 6 different and very important websites that could be useful to you. Travelpalestine.ps, this is the official website of the Ministry of Tourism. It's quite informative. We have the holylandoperators.com, which is the website for the 45, for my colleague Sami Abudai, there's the association, the Holy Land Incoming Tour Operators Association. There is a listing of the 45 or 50 different members that provide and offer different pilgrims to the Holy Land. So it's another good resource for you if you're planning. The Hotel Association, they have a listing of all the hotels if you want to do your own thing, not go through a tour operator. They're all listed on there. NEPTO. Now, NEPTO, this is a very new initiative. It's called the Network of Experimental Palestinian Tourism Organizations. It's a network of around over, I think, a couple of dozen NGOs that work in tourism in different aspects. They have been the pioneers in what we're calling this alternative tourism, these hiking, solidarity tours, longer stay, homestay. And there's around 22 of them, and they each have a special niche. And I think they are paving the way for, like we said, to try and diversify our tourism offer and add on to the overall pilgrimage experience. PASTA, this is more for the outgoing and the airlines, but again, it's not a bad website. Visitpalestine.ps, this is a website that I founded around 4 years ago. It's very comprehensive, it's very informative, it's available in 4 different languages. We just recently also launched a mobile version for the website, so again, if you're coming with your smartphone, like we said, Palestine doesn't have 3G technology, but there's Wi-Fi pretty much anywhere you go. So we're trying to put this information in the palm of your hands. And hopefully before the end of the year, we'll be launching the iPhone application. And that pretty much sums it up for me. Thank you.
When I was in the seminary, the professor of homiletics gave us a guideline that I rarely followed, and it was that of the 3 B's. Be bright, be brief, and be gone. I've never been any one of those at any one time even, much less all three. Both Sammys robbed my entire speech. So I will not address things they have already raised. But what I would like to do is, thought came to me while they were speaking. The expectations on all sides of religious tourism are rather varied. My experience of having worked in Florida in the diocese for 25 years, and then been in Jerusalem since 1999, the pilgrim, especially from America, comes with a devotional expectation. They're not really primarily interested in commercial on their first visit. Now, many people don't go back for the second one. So it's a very difficult sell that the profession of tourism has to come to those who have expectations that are very much devotional. The history of pilgrimage in the Catholic Church has been, you go and it's basically a penitential concept. You're going because, as some of the cynics in the Jaffa Gate area will say, look at all these people now in their old age finding religion after living a life of debauchery. They're coming to our churches and repenting. That flavor may not be spoken of, but that is very much in the hearts of a lot of people. Now, admittedly, I worked in Florida, which was often referred to as God's waiting room, or the land of the newlywed and the nearly dead. So, and that, of course, has changed over those many years. Florida, when I went there at first, was missionary country. There were 2 dioceses in Florida when I started. There are 9 at this time. So the growth has been phenomenal. And again, the expectations, though, tend to be we're going on a religious, prayerful, retreat-like pilgrimage. Now, the difficulty with that is that there are many things to see in Israel, in the Holy Land, Palestine, and in the Israeli side. 8 days, 9 days, it's a whirlwind if you try to bring in so much of that. So what I normally suggest to people, especially if they're a little bit younger and can go back a second time, if you want to go the first time for that very religious and emotional side, do that, but don't try to cover everything. Then the next time you go back, you may not want to always go with a large group of 50 people because you're going to be herded around and you're not going to visit with the living stones. You'll have seen the old dead stones the first time around, and you'll even be inclined to think that Jesus walked exactly on these stones when it's a few levels below present city level in most places, especially in Jerusalem. A lot of it is nostalgic when you go the first time. You have no idea that Calvary looks like what it looks like until you get there. And people will say, well, this doesn't look like Calvary. And I said, you've been there at the time of Jesus? To say it doesn't look like it was? Well, nothing looks like what you have imagined it to be. So that's the first difficulty I see with the religious tourism. It's a nice title, but tourism is tourism. And the men who work in tourism have a life to live and a business to run and an income and a whole livelihood to work at. That's not very much uppermost in the minds of the pilgrims that I have dealt with. They're just here to see the land of Jesus and the land of our forefathers, as it were. Now, the second point I would like to bring out is that I think it's very important for the Christian side to take care to, and this isn't being exclusive, but support the Palestinian Christian side. Stay in Bethlehem. Stay in those areas that you will greatly help their economy if you support that area. Choose a Palestinian tour guide. And if you're a Christian group, choose a Christian one because you need that insight into there. I mean, I've heard at Calvary when I used to sit there for many hours, This would say, well, this is Abraham sacrificing his son Ishmael. You're ready to say, wait a minute, are we getting our images a little confused here? But there are things, and I've heard Jewish guys saying this, well, this is the Armenian Quarter. What gives them the right to come in here and own any part of our land? So you don't need that kind of dissonance on your pilgrimage there. Normally you can rely on the Christian Palestinian tour guide to give you a fairly good spiritual insight. Not perfect, but certainly it can be more accurate. If you're going as a religious, then go as a religious tour. Don't be expecting everything on the one tour. If you're going on a purely tour side, go with a tour group. But don't be crying if you're not getting to all the favorite places that you would have imagined spiritually. You'll have to go with what they offer, and that's a very legitimate thing. The third part that I would recommend is, if you're gone before on a pilgrimage, come back on a living stones type. Arrange to, and it doesn't have to be with a group. It can be with yourself or a small group, and make arrangements prior to visit with parishes, to visit with local families. Many of them are very willing to take into their homes and offer hospitality. And that was one of the marvels that I delighted in. The Palestinian hospitality was marvelous. I got to meet many on a fairly superficial acquaintance of Muslim shopkeepers, and it was always, when I went there at first, I wasn't dressed as a priest, and I would hear the term fadl, but my ear heard father, and I'm thinking, how do these people know I'm a priest? I'm walking by all these shops, and I said, oh, wow, these are talented, gifted, intuitive people. One man, a Muslim man, started speaking to me in the Gaelic language. And of course, I knew what he was saying, so I spoke back to him. But then I said to him in Gaelic, how did you know that I was Irish? And of course, he didn't answer that because he didn't know what I was saying, but he knew a few greetings. So I said, how did you know it? He said, well, I looked at your face and I saw the map of Ireland on your face. I guess that's normal. Yeah, I can pick out Polish people, Romanian, having lived there, so you get an eye for those sort of things. Final mark that I would make is this. There is a very dangerous interpretation of the Older Testament in regard to the term people of God. And that's a very delicate thing, I find, and must be tackled squarely, especially in the Western world, and particularly here in the United States. Very often it's assumed that the nation of Israel, as is known today, is the people of God, that somehow God fulfilled the prophecies of the Older Testament that he was going to bring them back to their own land. Now be very careful. In the beginning, God raised up a great prophet, Moses, the meekest man who ever lived according to the Older Testament, and that was written in a context. The known world at that time wasn't what we know today. But it's very dangerous to assume that what happened in 1948, that God used the United Nations as his prophetic leader, David Ben-Gurion, and the rest of the fairly Marxist-trained minds of that era, to somehow reestablish the people of God. Yes, it came back as the Zionist state. Please don't conclude incorrectly from that was God's move. In fact, there are some fairly decent Hasidic rabbis who will say that was not what happened. This is not what they envisioned even for it. So American Christians, a certain group of them, tend to think this is God's anointed. Please. I met an Israeli woman, born, raised, educated, and worked there, presently living in Amsterdam, and she likes to come back every 2 years, and I met her sitting at the Holy Tomb. And she said to me, the greatest day of my life was the day I left this country. And I said, and you're a Jewish woman, and you say that? She said, yes, because the God of Israel today is money and technology. Now that's a quote. Obviously, it's one person. It's not the sentiment of the whole nation. But somebody who may have grasped a little bit of what modern Israel is. You do not reject the Son of God and call yourself the people of God. A people of God is a person who is totally surrendered to the God who is. And sadly, I discovered in parish life, many of us have the God of our own minds. And in the little community of priests that the Lord led me to found many years ago, I once said to one of the brothers, "To whom do you pray?" And he said, "God." And I said, "Who is this God?" You know. It's a great word in America, you know. I said, "No, I don't. Tell me." He said, "God." I said, "You are as ignorant as the stones you're standing on. Why don't you admit I haven't a clue who I'm praying to?" We would be much better off if we acknowledged that. Most of us say, "Well, thus saith the Lord." It's great if you're quoting from the Word of God, but a lot of us will stand up and speak for God that we don't know. Now, try an ambassador speaking for a president or a country that he knows nothing or very little about, and see how successful he will be as an ambassador. Paul says we're ambassadors for Christ. Do we know the Christ? Have we ever asked him to reveal himself to us? Give me your mind, Lord, on what this situation is today in the Holy Land. We don't, because we're living as a dysfunctional family. Now imagine if you're in a family, you have a father, mother, and there are 4 or 5 kids, or 3 or whatever, and the father doesn't speak to the children don't hear the parents, they don't hear each other, and you call that functional family? And the church calls itself the family of God, and we never hear from God. Isn't it marvelous that we have the boldness to stand up and call ourselves the family of God? You see, we need a massive dose of humility, and only then will we be able to hear the promptings of God's Holy Spirit telling us this is pleasing, this is displeasing. Now, I raise that in the context of this is the Israel of God. St. Paul in Romans said, not all Israel is Israel. It's a great word to stump the human mind. We need to reflect on it. That doesn't mean we go around saying we're it and they're not. Not at all. We're all a bunch of rotten sinners. We're not as great as we think we are. God is great. The Almighty is great, and he will do great things, but he resists the proud and draws near to the lowly. So when it comes to tourism in Israel, I say to people, be humble. Come here and expect only what God is going to deliver to you. And some might get wonderful graces because that's what God wants to deliver, and others may have a very difficult time because maybe you need a difficult time. Do you remember this morning we talked about God fixing a fix to fix you? Well, don't get rid of those little fixes that you experience on a pilgrimage if they don't fit in well with you. There may be something broken in the heart that needs that repair. So I will conclude on that and say to you, by all means, not only come to the Holy Land, but I beseech you, investigate further what the purpose of coming there is, and go and draw others to it. Rome and Fatima and all of those, Medjugorje, are delightful places to go. But the birthplace of the faith is in the Middle East. It's in the Holy Land. We need to come back to encounter God, and he walks that land, I assure you. Jesus Christ walks that land day after day, waiting to meet anyone who will come to him. That's part of his gift to this world. If the Holy Land converts, I guarantee you the entire world will be transformed. If the Holy Land does not convert, we're in for a very devastating time in world history. Don't think it's business as usual the way things are going on today. It may not look all that bad on the surface, it may look bad, but God is moving. Even though man is out of control, God is in control. Why? He's always on the throne. We need to get off the throne and allow God to come back onto it, to lead us even in the very simple thing like a religious pilgrimage to the Holy Land. God wants to do great things for that land to become what he wanted it to be in the first place, a shining light to the nations. St. Peter puts it this way: a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people set apart to proclaim the mighty works of God, not to boast and say, we're the chosen and you're not. God is everything. That's the ultimate purpose of any action of ours, and in this particular context, to any pilgrimage that may be made. May he be glorified.
Thank you. Thank you, Father.
There have always been pilgrims to the Holy Land. There are accounts of pilgrims from the very earliest period of history, and much of what we know about the Holy Land in late antiquity and in the early Middle Ages is from accounts of pilgrims. But at the end of the 19th century, as travel got to be easier, there began to be a different kind of tourism there. Anybody ever read Mark Twain's book about touring the Holy Land? His account of, yes, quite amazing. Mark Twain is of course, comparing it to everything he knows in the United States, and he writes at a time in which he's pretty sick and tired of what he sees around him at home. That's one of the reasons he makes his trip. But then the further he gets over there, the stranger it becomes, and he's torn between trying to be civil to people who seem to be so very different than what he expected, and just pouring scorn on them because they don't have telegraphs and trains and all the things that he's left behind. It's a very interesting book. At that same period of time, there began to be a large number of European tourists, and they left lots of relics behind them. The big Lutheran place that you visit if you go to Jerusalem is the Augusta Victoria Hospital, which is a very wonderful modern hospital which does a great deal of good. Right next to it is Augusta Victoria Church, which looks for all the world like it could be any place in Saxony. The Kaiser wanted there to be a place in the Holy Land where German pilgrims could go to worship and to be reminded that all this other stuff was fine, but that they were Lutherans and they were not to forget that just because they were away from home. Augusta Victoria Church is huge, too. I mean, it's just enormous, but it's a very beautiful place, now somewhat overshadowed by the hospital, but it wasn't always that way. Anyway, as tourism has evolved, I personally think that it has evolved for the better. I am most familiar with tourists from my tradition who lately have gone to accompany the people they meet in the Holy Land, not just to visit and to regard them as sort of bystanders in the museum, so to speak, but to treat them as real folks who have real lives and who are really interesting. The young people, especially that I know who travel there, undertake a kind of engagement, a kind of involvement with people that involves working on common projects. The most common thing I know is for a group of, say, high school or college students to go to work someplace for a week and then to tour for 3 or 4 days. That is just the best fun for them, and they get to be in conversational contact for a while with people of about the same age who have some of the same interests and a lot of the same abilities and a lot of the same technology. I think that the thing that people report to me when they come back is, boy, those folks are dealing with some of the same things we are, but their circumstances are a lot more difficult. And I think that's a learning that young people need to have. I think that they probably are going to get that learning all over the world. And I'm hoping that American young people can be, more than folks my age, open to the possibility that life is really worth living outside the United States. That's something that we don't always take for granted. We often assume that what's here is perfectly normal. What's anyplace else is just too strange for words. But the kind of tourism that actually allows young people to engage with other people is the best kind. Doesn't hurt at all that they spend money while they're there. It's important that they be able to do that, and it's important that they do that in local communities too. I think that it's easy enough to do touring in Jerusalem and to be the kind of person who stays in the local version of the Holiday Inn and who eats in the local version of whatever restaurant you could probably find at home. But young people especially tend to spend their money in smaller places, and I think that that's good for them, and I hope good for the Palestinian economy generally. My own touring there has been in the company of a lot of Lutheran bishops. They put 60 of us on a set of buses and sent us over there very early in 2013. So the fighting was going on in Gaza, not very far from where we were. And that's the first thing that a tourist, I think, picks up on, that there can be a lot going on not too far away, and yet your experience is very happy and very protected, and there isn't any reason for you to be afraid to go. It grieves me sometimes that people say, well, it's sort of too dangerous. And these are the same people who ride on the metro in Washington. And I think that a little adventure in the human spirit would be enough to get people a good experience in Palestine. Nonetheless, when you visit there, you do encounter, no matter what, you do encounter at least a tiny little bit of the difficult reality that Palestinian people live with every day. When I was there, I stayed in just the most wonderful little, very small hotel in Bethlehem, and I had an early flight out, so they called me a taxi cab, and the man picked me up and drove me to Tel Aviv. And as we were getting into the airport, he said to me, "Tell them we came from Jerusalem." He said, "If you say we came from Bethlehem, they're going to send us over there on the side. We're going to wait for a long time. They'll let you out just in time to get to your plane," he said, "but I'll spend all day here." So I was dressed up like this, and I was thinking to myself, I don't know if I want to lie to these people. Then I thought I probably did. And so I said we had come straight from Jerusalem, and the fellow who was the security person there, who probably knew I was not telling the truth, just waved us right on through. Nonetheless, it's not that difficulty that strikes a person, that at least, I'll just speak for myself, it's not that difficulty that struck me when I was a tourist there. What struck me was what a wonderful place it is to visit. What great places there were to stay, how great the food was, how really generous and kind all the people we interacted with were. The wine's pretty good. We just had a wonderful time, and in various settings too. Sometimes in sort of large typical tourist places, other times in little out of the way places where there happened to be a few Lutherans for us to visit. I think that everyone should go. I do think that especially Christian people should go, and they should go there with the intention to see the holy sites. But they should remember that it is a holy place and a holy people too, and they should not limit their tourism to all the things that everybody else has already seen for centuries. There's a lot to look at and a lot to enjoy, and I think we should all get the chance to do that. Very good.
I guess we leave the floor for people who would like to ask questions.
Hear me what I was saying?
No.
And so it's sort of like, it's ironic that it's a hidden secret. So my question is, what are you going to do in terms of marketing in the U.S., and what can we do as individuals to help you market tourism in the Holy Land?
I guess, we travel quite a lot to reach out for the Christian communities. When it comes to pilgrimages, for for those who are belong to the Christian faith, we reach out. We are going out. We are involved with them, whether it is through the church or by reaching individuals. We encourage them to come through Christian companies. As a matter of fact, the last letter of Cardinal Dolan from New York, he wrote to all bishops in North America to travel and encourage to stay with the Christian community in the Holy Land. That was very effective, and this is what we are hoping to reach to the North American Christians.
We need to also let the Catholic newspapers know that.
There are quite a lot of work that we have to do, to tell you frankly. I mean, we are touching the surface. But the best market for us is North American market, and we would like to see more and more Americans coming on our side. For a while, the American market was exclusively coming on the Christian side in the Holy Land. Then, of course, what happened, then we had to compete. The evangelicals, somehow they were convinced that, biblical Israel is today's Israel. So you are talking about around 80 million people who are supporting the idea of Israel of today based on the faith. Of course, we don't want to, argue about it. Everyone has his own vision. But this is one of the changes that happened in the last 25, 30 years. Before that, it was purely Christian pilgrimages and coming to the Christian community.
And, if I can also add to that, like I mentioned, we're faced, or we're competing against a very highly, funded, highly resourced, highly efficient Israeli industry. They spend over $50 million a year on marketing. They have over 20 offices worldwide just promoting Israel and pilgrimages to Israel. Our shortcoming is, I think, our marketing efforts, our promotional efforts as an industry have not been centralized. They've been pretty much ad hoc. And we know we cannot compete in terms of advertising dollars if you're just talking, budget to budget. And that's why we feel we need to do much more, networking and personal selling and personal relations. And in many cases, it's the returning visitors when they come back the second time, their eyes are open the first trip. And when they come back the second time, like my colleague said, they are interested in seeing other sites and doing other things, and they're more aware that they should try and plan their trips. I'm not going to say only via Palestinian tour operators, but at least to have a more of an open mind when they are coming. And again, our shortcoming is we have not been efficient enough in our outreach, in our networking, in our promotions as a Palestinian industry, competing against a much more efficient counterpart.
Sally, is that right?
Yes.
I think you raised a good point about, maybe not everyone knows this in the room, that each diocese in the United States has its own newspaper. At least when I was in the diocese, we had a weekly, maybe now they've changed to a bi-monthly type of publication. But it's a very widely read magazine. And I think if you advertised in that on a regular basis and kept it there, consider all the number of dioceses and the people who get it will read through that and see it. So I think if you have some type of a little persuasive ad and informative, that would also be a great help. And it would save you leg room. You don't have to travel a lot. It's just there for you. So thank you for that idea. But it would be good if somebody could bring, I think Rateb may have a whole directory of all the dioceses, and you could just get it and send it to them.
Yeah, in the program, you could just use all the bishops' letters, and I think there are about 25 letters in there from 25 archdioceses. There would be a perfect communication.
Sure.
That's exactly what I told Ratib. he should take advantage of the support, that he has through those letters.
Please,
to
if you
reach out
wish,
to the people.
please, if you wish to speak, speak to the microphone, because we are streaming live and people need to hear us all over the country and the world.
Okay, hi. Question. There was an article in the Washington paper recently that the Anti-Defamation League took 20 Catholic teachers to the Holy Land, and one of the teachers wrote an article that was in the thing that said how, they were going to come back and do all this pro-Israeli stuff and everything, and it was obvious from the article they hadn't meant any of the Christians living there and gotten the Christian perspective when they were there. And I was wondering, especially Bishop or Father, when you see pilgrimages come back, or you had a pilgrimage with 60 bishops, do they have that experience, or is that something that the church can help promote more, or it's a little disturbing to me as a Catholic that the Catholics go there and don't meet with other Catholics, that they miss the Christian perspective. So I'm wondering if that's something that you see happening.
One of the issues is that there are organizations that will sponsor very carefully guided tours for people they perceive to be thought leaders. So teachers or religious leaders, I'm always receiving invitations from Jewish organizations who will fly me to Israel and show me around and just give me the best experience of all time and fly me home. And the people I know who have made those trips have had a good time and have seen a variety of Jewish leaders. So they have not gotten a strict party line about the politics of Israel, but they have not met anybody in the Christian community at all. And so I do think that we need to be a little more proactive about putting the word out that some of these trips are not entirely free after all, and that people need to be aware that there are a variety of people who live in that place, and that if you don't get to meet most of them somehow or other, then you haven't really had a good experience. A pastor in my synod, we have synods instead of dioceses, so a pastor in my synod was on one of those tours, had a wonderful experience with local leaders, and I said to her when she got back, well, what did you think of the separation wall? And she said, we never saw that. And I said, well, you probably didn't have an entirely unbiased tour then, did you? And she said, well, no, now that you mention it, we didn't. So it's not just those teachers that you were talking about. It's lots of people who travel that great distance and who don't see much, let's put it that way.
Every year, a group of Catholic bishops, mostly a representative group from Europe and the United States, come to the Holy Land in January, and they spend about 10 days there. It's purely directed through the Latin Patriarchate, and they do get to see both sides, and they spend more time on the Palestinian side, which is good. And a wonderful experience that they had last January, they were on a bus, all of them, going through Calandia, the checkpoint there. And they were delightfully delayed 2 hours while they were being reviewed. Their passports were taken and they went away. And it was a good experience to have the bishops actually not be treated as kind of dignitaries and diplomats that you're ushered through the checkpoint without any hassle. And so some of their blood pressures went up, and their a few other things elevated in their system, namely the irritability and probably the anger, and a greater sense of picking up in just those 2 hours some of the frustration that Palestinians go through. I mean, I've had minor frustrations where I wanted to let my Irish come out and lose my priesthood almost, but thank God I was restrained within. But the humiliations are unbelievable, and it's not that people haven't been humiliated throughout the world in a different age, but in this time in history, in 2013, with so much education, you do expect people to have much greater sensitivity. And it's good that those who come there do experience those harassments that the ordinary people of the place go through. Very, very frustrating. I remember when I went there at first, I could go from Jerusalem to Ramallah in 20 minutes. Now it can be anything from an hour to an hour and a half. People who lived within, from Jeremiah's hometown of Anathoth, what is it in Arabic? Anathoth in English. And it takes them forever to get there. Little children, to go through a gate, their school is on the other side, takes 2 minutes, and to have the security tell them go walk 2 kilometers and come back up the other side. Come on, 6-year-old kids being treated like they're terrorists. Well, TSA is doing a good job here of similar things, right? Excuse me, I couldn't resist that.
I have a question for Mr. Curry. I was intrigued by your use of the phrase transformation, a pilgrimage for transformation. And you just made it quickly and moved on. I wonder if you could expand on what all you have in mind in that.
Well, I think it depends on what a pilgrim or a visitor expects to gain and to come back with when they do come and visit the Holy Land. And from my experience and from my understanding, if they're only coming just simply to visit the actual stones and the churches and to celebrate Mass within their group, and yes, it's an experience. It's probably a very rewarding experience for them as well. But I don't think that they will take back this whole notion of a pilgrimage for transformation. I have heard it in different lectures, and I have tried to use it. And I think, if you do see and you do feel the other dimensions, specifically the human dimension, and by interacting not just with the Palestinian Christians, but with the Palestinians as a people, if you're coming in this conscience and you're trying to experience a much more authentic kind of a pilgrimage, because again, the living stones are an integral part of Christianity today. And I think this is, if you talk to people who have taken a classical, traditional pilgrimage, and those who have taken one that has multi-layered and multidimensional, you feel the transformation when they come back. Whether it's through their recommendations, whether it's for their return trip when they come back again. And I think every person, depending on what your expectations are, you will be transformed in one way or another. But I think, again, the more layers, the more dimensions, the more human interaction there is, I think it'll be a much more rewarding and what we're calling a transformational experience. I don't know if that elaborates enough.
I know that a number of people on the panels today come from universities, and so I'm wondering what you and we as a community are doing to expose our youth to these kinds of opportunities. I happen to live here in Montgomery County in a neighborhood that has an Orthodox temple there, synagogue, and the kids are doing gap years and going over to Israel, and with our youth being so multicultural and so well traveled, I'm wondering if that is a focus, and if not, do you think there's more potential there to get our youth, because that experience too is going to truly advance the goals of everybody in this room. So
let me just answer quickly. In my church, there's a program that's called Young Adults in Global Mission. And that takes people who are recent college graduates and sends them different places in the world to do ministry for a year, carefully supervised and with a little time to travel. But the place that everybody wants to go is Jerusalem. There are 5 young people there from all over the United States every year, and they rotate through, and they do different projects. And that is transformative for those people. It's not cheap, and it would be to make it a much larger program would really change it. But the kind of thing you're talking about, which is trying to engage people while they're still young, while they're still forming their opinions, and while they'll see things with fresh eyes, is something that I think all churches take seriously these days, and all religious institutions, as you witness.
There is something that we are reaching out for seminarians. We are inviting hundreds per year for seminarians with different denominations to come over and visit the land. And this is very effective because they are the future leaders. If you look at the church, the leadership is getting older. And our main business is really, getting the individual priest or the pastor to come up with a group. And not everyone is, able to do it. However, when they are coming in at a younger age and leaving the the seminary, they are very effective, and they are the ones who we are hoping will maintain the business coming over to the Holy Land.
I'd also add on to that. I think another one of the challenges that we do face is our industry, because it's been catering to, prepackaged group kind of tours, the infrastructure is not really built or catered to develop to the individual, to your average individual traveler. We have a hard enough time getting over this fear barrier of, the safety and security, so people have a bit of a comfort level that they're inside their bus. Although this is, not the facts on the ground. There are some initiatives, and I mentioned one of the websites, the nepto.ps, and a lot of their programs and a lot of their efforts are geared actually to the youth who are on the gap year. They have different listings of organizations where they can come and volunteer for longer stays. My company, we've hosted a master's student from London who came and spent 2 months working, interning with us and living in Beit Sahur. So it's there, but it's not really promoted. And again, the product is there, the organizations are there that supply it, but we have a hard time in the networking and the outreaching and into getting over this barrier that yes, as an individual, as fresh out of college, you can actually come to Palestine, wander around, find, do an internship and spend some more time with the local communities.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we conclude this session, just let me read a short poem that I wrote. Some of you know I come from Jerusalem. I love Jerusalem. I left there to study, but Jerusalem is in my heart. And I used to walk, obviously, all the streets of Jerusalem, and I see tourist guides. So I wrote a short poem about tourist guides I'd like to read. He stands at choice sights, casting his net wide and deep. Buenos dias, parlez-vous français? Welcome, a tour of my city. I am at your service. With lightning speed, he pulls the net of tourists before competition arrives or minds change. He leads his flock down a crowded street, colors, faces, shopkeepers hunting for tourists. Why are you in a hurry? Come in, come in. No charge for looking, cheap. He speaks softly as he touches the cross, the crescent, the wall. He introduces everyone to prophets and saints, the passage of history in the city of peace. Auf Wiedersehen. Return soon, bring your children with you. Jingling the change, he blends into the sights and sounds. So please, take your family, take your friends, take your neighbors, go visit the Holy Land. It is life-changing, and when you go there, you'll always want to come back. Thank you very much.